This is not another ecom podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. Amazon sellers, especially retail arbitrage sellers, know them well. The UPC barcode, which is fixed to products and tags during the manufacturing process, essentially guides and helps track the product through the supply chain globally until it's finally scanned by a cashier or warehouse worker as it gets to the end consumer. But my question is, how does it know? The barcode can theoretically be scanned at any time for many different purposes. And this is all made possible as the UPC barcode was made a global standard thanks to the work at GS1, a not-for-profit user-guided organization. And GS1 uniquely unites the business community, fostering consensus and best practices and standards-based solutions. And so today I'd like to introduce Megan Baumer and Shane Morris from the business development team at GS1 US. And their roles are pivotal in shaping the future of e-commerce. They collaborate closely with agencies, platforms, and marketplaces, guiding brands to scale and to thrive. And so their mission is simple. It's to illuminate the role of global standards in commerce and the retail supply chain, along with making these standards accessible and comprehensible to businesses of all sizes, and hopefully me. And so, Megan and Shane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us, Ian.
So we'll just kind of get started off. Can you both tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe Megan, you can kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Ian, I'm glad we recorded that because I'm pretty sure I'm going to snag that intro you just gave us and reuse that. That was amazing. So thank you so much. My name is Megan Baumer, as you mentioned. So I have a little bit of a different background. Prior to my work at GS1 US, I worked in private label manufacture. So working with a lot of different kind of brands, making a lot of different kind of products. Got to have a really on the ground view of sort of some of what it takes to manufacture products and get them into the United States. Before that, I have a actually nonprofit background. So I worked in zoos for 15 years. So trying to sell a different kind of scary thing to a different kind of clientele.
Most definitely. Zoos is the world's biggest pivot, I think, at this point, because you're not really slapping so many barcodes onto animals, I hope. Well, maybe you are.
No, there is a whole method of management and standards there as well. So it's not as big a leap as it sounds.
Very cool. And Shane, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Yeah. Well, my name is Shane Morris. I'm also a business development director here at GS1 US. And my background has literally been retail my entire life. I grew up, my dad was part owner of grocery stores, grew up bagging groceries. When the scanner first came out, I worked for a large apparel retailer, switched over to the supplier side. So both of those jobs I was interacting with the standard, maybe not to the degree where I really knew what it was either. You just did what you were told and scanned the barcode. On the supplier side, so all this was pre-internet. And so I've kind of got to see the migration and the evolution of retail, if you will. And really I call it the democratization of retail, of these, as a brand back in the day, it was hard to kind of break into the system. You would have to get on a plane, go see a buyer, try to get them to pick your item up. And then as soon as the internet started coming on board, and you just saw people being able to compete with all of the, the big players out there. And I've loved it. So that's what I've done my whole life. I had this opportunity to come over here and kind of get one layer kind of below the solution provider community, where we are helping the industry create standards that helps brands and businesses that support these brands scale and grow. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, that is super exciting. And, one of the things you mentioned was about, and this would be hard for me to say, the democratization. That was a toughie, of standards and, getting everybody on the same page in terms of, the e-commerce space, and especially, companies like private label sellers, especially on Amazon. Why are having standards important? Like, why do we even care?
Yeah, I that's a great question, Ian. The reality is that, if you look at what Amazon is, right, it's the everything store. You need to have a way to distinguish products from one another, right? If you're using private SKUs, everything's going to start to bump into each other. Consumer won't have a good experience. They won't be able to find what they need. And the UPC is really fills that gap. So it allows every product to be uniquely identified. So on a place like Amazon, where you have every product under the sun, each listing can be unique where it needs to be, and listings that are for the same product can be properly shown to the consumer. And Shane, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on to that, but obviously really important.
And so this is something that all businesses need to do. You need to tap into this kind of centralized information system in order to make sure that all the other pieces to the puzzle connect properly, right? Because at each point in the process, something gets scanned. And so where is this information stored? How does one get access? Is it really accessible? Can I go onto a website and figure this out?
That's a really good question. I think especially today there's so much interoperability out there, between trading partners and all the different solution providers. So if you take a step back and look at, I think number one is, why is our company even in existence? And so, clear back in the early 70s, it was the grocery industry that actually said, listen, we've got to come up with a solution to get people through our checkout lines quicker. Everything was being hand rung in. And for, kind of what you guys do, they needed a solution to change prices. Everything was literally being tagged, the can of corn at 99 cents, and now we got to mark it down to 59 cents, and they'd have to go out and literally hand do it. So that's essentially why the standard, the UPC barcode, was created, and it's scaled from there. But what's interesting of what you're talking about is, where is all this data stored? So how GS1 was created is actually the grocery industry kind of spun us off. So, we're created by industry for industry. So there was one source of truth within this vertical that they could enumerate these different product identifiers from. And then we also weren't obliged or necessarily taking direction from one person. We were industry driven. So we were looking for the good of the industry. That just kind of scaled and proliferated from there. As far as all the information goes, I think and I'm getting to the point here, is today that information is still siloed, right? So each different Amazon has their product information. Nordstrom has their product information. Target, Walmart, it's all siloed. The beauty of the standard, though, is because they all use that same standard, it's interoperable across all their systems. From a brand standpoint, it's great because you only have to do it one way from one source. And, so if you're going to identify your products with that GS1 identifier, that one identifier is going to work across all the different platforms to get you into those different environments you want your products to get into. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So where my mind's going with this is like something that's, a big brand, rather generic, is like a Nike dry fit t-shirt, black, size large, this specific model. So Nike makes 1 million of these t-shirts in this size, this model, and that particular unit, style, and everything has its own UPC. And then so what I'm understanding is that each store or let's say each store will go in and they have the technology to be able to scan that UPC, but then from the information that they take from that UPC, they can do whatever they want with it in terms of like changing pricing, tell the computer where to send X amount of units to which store at what time, and all these different measures.
Yes, absolutely. That's correct. So the identifier almost acts like the product license plate, right? That UPC says this is that Nike shirt in this size, in this color. But it's the retailers then take that identifier, update the pricing as needed, update the inventory as needed. But for the brand, from the brand's perspective, they just need to label the product that one way, and then all their retailers will do what they need to do with it.
Okay. And so does that barcode hold any information? When I send it to, how does that work when I send a box of Nike t-shirts to, Dick's Sporting Goods, and Dick's Sporting Goods scans it? How do they know that that is black in size large and this model?
Shane, can you answer that question from the retailer perspective? And then I have something I want to talk about too.
Yes. Okay. So today what happens is, and that's, I think, the beauty of the standard. So the brand is going to come into GS1 US and they're going to license what's called a GS1 company prefix. What that prefix does is that, number one, it uniquely identifies their company, and then they can create these product identifiers from it. So they're the source, they have that unique number, and they create the product and all the different attributes that go along with it. They probably upload it in their, item master or their product catalog. What they do then, if when Dick says, hey, we want to buy these Nike t-shirts, that company is then going to share their product information with them in various different ways. So there are things called data pools, so that brand will upload their product information to one place or a product catalog, and then Dick's only has one place to go get that. A lot of those data pools are GS1 certified. So there is a thing called the Global Data Synchronization Network, and so that's all kind of certified through GS1 standards. So not only the products verified and validated, but some of the attributes as well. So essentially what they're doing today is they're just these large retailers. The brands are uploading their product information either into a product catalog that syndicates that information out, or just directly with the retailer. They're sharing that, the product information with that retailer. So it's in their system. So when then that product starts going across the supply chain, it's that information that they shared, they're sharing it with the different people across the supply chain. They can scan it, and it's going to, and that barcode though only carries that number. It doesn't carry any other information today. So that number is going to then do a lookup into their price catalogs. That's how it works today, and that's how it's worked for 50 years. And that's, it has scaled and proliferated, but now Megan's about to blow your mind. Right? With what? Is that where you were going, Megan?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah. Shane and I talk a lot, so I'm sure he knows where I'm going with this, which is that, so again, that UPC barcode carries 12 digits, which is that number, that unique identifier that connects to all these other systems. But that barcode is going to evolve. As part of an initiative called Sunrise 2027, U.S. industry is leading the charge towards a transition from that UPC to a 2D barcode, which is essentially a QR code. From the way a consumer is going to perceive it, it's going to look and act like a QR code. So you'll be able to scan the back of the package. The same way you do, a lot of brands have a QR code, a proprietary QR code on their package now to storytell or connect with their consumers. The goal is that QR code is going to use a GS1 standard called Digital Link, which will allow it to take the place of the UPC barcode and go beep at checkout. It'll interact with the consumer, and it's going to be able to carry a ton of data that will allow for some great business-to-business use cases. So things like batch lots or expiration dates. So if you want to be able to communicate things like product recalls, help with sort of serialization. So if you have a very high value product, and instead of identifying it down to the SKU, you want to identify it down to that individual product, that will be enabled by this much more powerful barcode. So the next couple of years, that transition is going to be happening. You're starting to see some wave makers already starting to put it on their products, but it's going to start to proliferate over time. So if you're listening, start scanning the barcodes you see on the back of packages, because you're going to get to have a good experience and learn a lot about your products.
That's really neat. So what I'm understanding is like it's a way of getting more granular with each and every product. So, if we're talking, we move from the idea, we'll move back to, groceries, because that's Shane's, that's his origin story. You have, this might not be true, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. You have boxes of Cheerios, right? Like right now, maybe each box of Cheerio theoretically might have the same SKU, even though they're produced, or same barcode, even though they're produced at different times. And so with the 2D barcode, it'll say that these two boxes of Cheerios might look the same, but one was in fact produced in factory A, one was produced in factory B, and then factory A was produced at this date, factory B was produced at that date, and you'd actually be able to see the difference or stand the difference, so to speak.
Yeah, and if you use a use case beyond the Cheerios, let's go to milk. So think of what this is going to enable stores to do, and even, at the checkout, but you can embed not only that batch lot information like you just used for the Cheerios, but expiration dates or best sell dates. So that enables that store owner or, store manager to go out and actually scan their shelves to identify what's getting ready to expire, potentially use some ideation of seller snap to do that dynamic pricing before it, when it gets close to expire. But then, if it did expire, they're able to pull that off the shelf. That also has the ability to prevent somebody from walking out with, how many times has that happened in your life? Not a lot, but it has. You get home and it's like, oh, the milk's expired, so it'll prevent that as well.
And I presume that it'll also tell you exactly which cow it came
from. It could.
In future world, Ian, that's what we're heading towards.
That's why they hired the person that worked with animals to come to GS1, so we know which cow it came from. No, it's in there. I think that's a really incredible, leap, because you said UPCs had more or less haven't changed in 50 years. And so why now? Why is 2027, the benchmark for making something that's been the status quo for so long?
I think there's a lot of answers to that, Ian. I mean, I think it's anchored in the consumer, right? Consumers now want more information about their product. They're shopping, more strategically based on their values. So where was this made? Was it made with, sustainable products? How can I recycle it? I think that's, one of the absolute cornerstones of why this change is happening. You're also having more specific regulation, so the EU is passing a lot of legislation about how to present recycling information, for example. It's really hard to do that on packaging alone, especially if you have a greeny item, right? And there's all kinds of legislation like that all over the world that, is forcing brands to be, more responsive, how they're going to comply. And also the world is global, right? So if you're selling a product in the United States and, you want to expand, you need new ways to interact with entirely new markets. That's a few. There's lots more, I'm sure, but, it's definitely, I think when it really comes down to it, it's what does the consumer want to know and what are they willing to do to learn about it?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you have to deal with regulations for different countries and also localization, I'm sure is big. In these 2D codes, it sounds like you'd be able to share so much information. You could also, send the right information or instruction packet for the item, to the right customer based on their geo, based on, where it was sold and all that information. So I think that's an incredible step into really giving customers what they want. I think that's a really interesting thing, especially since companies like Amazon are doing all these cross-border selling for the seller. I remember even seeing on, where was it? I think I was looking for a client for an item in Mexico. It says when you're buying the item that this is different from the items that are sold in Mexico. And you forget that these companies are so in tuned to the different, buyers, even though it's essentially the same product, there might be these small tweaks, small differences. For electronics. It might be, the electricity input itself that you have to be on top of that, be able to communicate with everybody at any given point.
And I think that's one of the, major powers of GS1 is that it's a global standard. So no matter where you are in the world, your UPC barcode is valid and unique.
That's super interesting. I guess my next question, this is such a big endeavor and there's obviously a lot of, R&D that goes into this and, it being a collaborative, GS1 being a collaborative organization and for an industry and being a nonprofit, how is an organization like this funded?
So we're a member organization, right? So when, we have at GS1 US, we have over 300,000 business members. And when they come to us to license their prefix, they do pay for that license and then they pay a maintenance fee on it annually to maintain their data. And that's where the majority of our revenue comes from.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense because they're also paying for a service essentially, but this is something that, it sounds like the bigger companies that need this kind of thing are also helping, am I understanding right? That they're helping these smaller companies that might not have the resources in order to leverage something like this. So if I'm a brand new private label seller on Amazon, am I going to come and join GS1 or am I just going to reap the benefits? Or can I still reap the benefits?
Well, as a label seller, it doesn't matter how big or small you are as a brand. When you come to GS1 and you license either a single G10, so you license that, or you get a prefix, you become a member. And then you have you can reap all the benefits of even the largest, Walmart or Target. one thing I don't think a lot of people know is we do host also, because we are this not-for-profit and neutral organization, industry-driven. Our organization is kind of broken up into verticals. So there's food, grocery, general merchandise and apparel, food service, pharmaceutical. We host these industry work groups. And so that is something that, as a retailer, brand, solution provider, academic institution, these are all kind of the people that work on these work groups. Within these work groups, these guys all come together. So let's just say it's grocery. And Coke and Pepsi are sitting at the same table, essentially. And it's a non-competitive environment. And what they're discussing is, how do we improve the industry? Any supply chain challenges and efficiencies within the industry. And so that work group collaboratively, kind of gets together and, discusses issues and makes decisions that really benefit the industry overall. So, and a lot of people don't know that about our organization, that we host these.
And I think, Ian, you talked about localization. I think even like these major retailers are making space on their shelf for, smaller local brands because people want them. So I think it really is in industry's best interest to make sure that the standard is accessible, even to smaller businesses, to local businesses. So you can, as Shane mentioned, there's different capacities. You can come get 10 identifiers. You can come get 100,000. And, there should be something in your price point that'll allow you to participate in the standard without having to break the bank.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I didn't know that talk about having, local items in your store that makes a lot of sense to make that accessible, but also, probably makes it really easy to, buy these brands and buy these small companies in order to scale them and distribute. So, these larger companies also have a bit of vested interest in that, because if they can help standardize the process for the little guys, when it's time to buy, it's probably a much easier integration.
Definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. We spoke a lot about, barcodes and things like that. Are there other things that GS1 is working on that's kind of beyond that space? Because you have the work groups. So what else is going on there?
Yeah, GS1 standards represent, a lot more, I think, than just barcodes, stuff that people interact with every single day. So Shane mentioned the global data synchronization network that allows brands and retailers to sort of share product data beyond just that UPC. Electronic data interchange, or EDI, is another very large standard in the United States. It's based on GS1 standards as well. So that allows brands and retailers to send documents back and forth. There are some of the larger Amazon sellers that are participating in with EDI. Just helps create much more seamless, faster transactions with lower human touch points. So you have like less errors, less chargebacks, all that sort of stuff. And if you're a brand that's starting to work in retail, you're going to start to see EDI in onboarding guidelines, right? So that's one that's going to pop up. And we do get a lot of questions about that from smaller businesses because it sounds really complicated and overwhelming. We try to help people through it. It's, make it, but, it's a great investment in your business because it really, you do see some massive reduction in labor and, a lot of efficiencies there. And, I think we have an amazing also innovations team that's kind of constantly doing new stuff. So they're looking at things like sustainability. We have a whole initiative looking at RFID technology, which, is really changing the way that businesses do inventory and interact with their product and their consumer. Shane, anything else to add on?
I would just add on that it's not necessarily new development, but we do have what's called a data hub tool, which is accessible to any brand. So any member. So it doesn't matter if you've licensed one G10 or you have the 100,000. This data hub tool is just a data repository where they, it could get overwhelming even if you buy 100 UPCs. Like, how do I assign it? What attributes can I assign to it? You can do that all within this data hub tool. You can manage all your products, assign your G10s, create even your barcode, and then export that information into your proprietary product catalog. It's just basic attribute information, not as, I used to sell to Amazon and that spreadsheet, got huge. It's not that big, but it's the same information that you would use on that Amazon listing page. So it's just a great benefit to members, and not everybody knows that they have access to that. So I always like to throw that out.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It seems like everything that we're talking about is coming down to the speed of being able to transfer information. And because that ultimately is, if it helps the companies, hopefully it helps the bottom line, which ultimately you can, hopefully pass on to the consumers. Megan, I want to take a step back a little bit. You mentioned like a little bit about, RFID technology, and something that kind of pinged in my brain, and maybe this is kind of in the right vein. I've been noticing recently in retail stores that you have these kind of checkout stations or self-checkout stations where you just have all of your items in your arm and you drop it in a box and it knows like what's in the box, and it gives you it rings everything up kind of all at once. Is that the kind of RFID information we're talking about, that kind of use case?
It could be. It could also be machine vision. So, which is basically where you have a visual scan of a product that is extremely intelligent and understands, what a product looks like from every single side and can therefore identify it that way. So, it could be RFID as well, because RFID would allow us potentially a similar process. So it really depends on the technology. I think from our perspective, all of those things have a place, in the future, right? To make things easier for the consumer, make the gathering of data easier for retailers and brands alike. What we do is provide that unique identification that is required no matter how the scanner is picking up on what a product is. It needs a way to identify it. So we look at all of those things, within our business and try to understand, how do we stay relevant in a world that is using RFID, in a world that's using machine vision? And that's a big part of what we do every day.
Yeah, I love that. Shane, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think Megan summed it up. I'll tell you, I walked in for the first time to an Amazon grab and go, or, where there's nobody in there, and I put
It's incredible.
It is. And, you put your palm in, go in, and I think I bought some headphones, and I was thinking the same thing. But our organization is constantly pushing the boundaries, looking at what technology is happening, what forward technology is happening out there, and trying to understand how standards can apply to those technologies. That's what makes working here so exciting. So not only are you in kind of the day-to-day of how business is done, but we're always looking to the future.
And I just want to add that there is one thing I'm really excited, and I haven't gotten to try it yet, but the smart carts where you can just grocery shop and then the card like checks you out as you go and you can just walk out. I really want to find one of those stores because I want to try that one.
Yeah, those things are so rad. I know that Amazon Go store, took my wife a few weeks ago to the first one because I saw one as we were driving by, and she didn't love that I was doing this, but I was like sneaking bags of M&Ms into like her pocket and her purse just as just so you do. And then I would like take stuff I'd put inside my jacket pocket, and she's like, you're not stealing, right? Because I don't have the ability to from a moral standpoint, but it's a great way to kind of feel like you are and get a little bit of that rush. So if that technology does any good in the world, it gave me a few laughs by actually probably overcharging me for M&Ms. But yeah, as we kind of near the end of the episode, I wanted to ask the both of you, for especially, the audience of this podcast is, Amazon sellers, especially up and coming Amazon sellers. And so what advice, if any, would you give to Amazon sellers about this specific, part of the retail and e-commerce business?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, from a standards perspective, there's a lot of different kinds of Amazon sellers. Some of them are going to come to us and be members. Some of them are not, but they're still going to be engaging with the standard, right? They're going to need to know the UPCs of the product that they're selling. I think it's just important that they understand GS1, at least at a high level, know a little bit about us to know, how to engage with us when they need, what kind of questions they need to ask, and when to draw on us if they have an issue, right? If they have a listing that gets flagged, understand the kind of resource that we can be for you. And please always feel free to reach out if you need help. That's our goal. Our goal is to help business thrive. And we're here to answer those questions and provide you with that guidance if you need it.
Incredible. Thank you. Shane, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I would say, and I love speaking to the community of people who are maybe new to the market. Yeah, we often say, or I do, is you got to start with the end in mind sometimes and not think of where your business is today and it's maybe your first product and you're listing one product on Amazon, but where do you want your business to be 5 years from now? And one of the key foundations of where you want your business to be is to make sure that you start doing things. And it's not just with GS1 standards, do it the right way. Do it with GS1, because as you start scaling and growing out there in the marketplace, you're going to see that it's not just Amazon asking for it. It's Walmart, it's Target, it's CVS, it's most retailers are going to be asking for this standard. And they're asking for it because they just want to do business as efficiently as possible. But, there's other things that you got to do the right way too, as far as you're setting up your business, and just take your time, do it the right way, and you'll reap the benefit. It might take a little bit more time at the beginning, but you'll reap the benefits as your business does start scaling across different channels.
Yeah, I think, just to kind of sum up what you're both saying, there's a lot of things that, probably should be done and can be done out there, and, taking the right steps and being proactive in those moments will help for these, moments of scaling all the way to the moments of selling. But, by aligning yourself with the industry standards, you're doing exactly that. You're aligning yourself with, if you're selling soda, you're aligning yourselves with the Coca-Cola and the Pepsis of the world, because they're the ones that, GS1 put in a room together to decide what is the best way to handle all these different use cases. So, be proactive and set yourself up for success. So Shane, Megan, thank you so much for joining on this episode of Not Another eComm Podcast. I had so much fun learning a little bit about barcodes and the future of barcodes in terms of 2D barcodes and why we should care. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us, Ian.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
All right. So that's it. Another episode of Not Another eComm Podcast. Be sure to tell us what you think in the comment section, and we'll see you next time.